Let me read to you what Azikiwe said in 1949. While he was calling Ẹgbẹ Ọmọ Odùduwà a fascist organization, let me read to you what he said about the Ibo Union. It would appear that the God of Africa has specially created the Ibo nation to lead the children of Africa from the bondage of the ages. The martial prowess of the Ibo nation at all stages of human history has enabled them not only to conquer others. These guys have no history of conquering anybody. And I've said it before, with all due respect, the reason they couldn't conquer anybody was not because they were altruistic. It was because they lacked the capacity. But Azikiwe is saying here that the martial prowess. Read the book by Dr. Nolly, Ethnic Politics in Nigeria by Dr. Nolly. He mentioned it. They could not even gather to fight a war together because they had no common identity until colonial era. That's what he said. Let's go back to the fantastic speech by the non-tribalist. This is not a tribalist though. This is what Azikiwe said in 1949. It would appear that the God of Africa has specially created the Ibo nation to lead the children of Africa from the bondage of the ages, as per Votron. The martial prowess of the Ibo nation at all stages of human history has enabled them not only to conquer others, but also to adapt themselves to the role of preserver. The Ibo nation cannot shirk its responsibility. Politically, you have seen with your own eyes how you were disenfranchised by the British. The Ibo nation has never been represented in the Executive Council. This is the Pan-African. This is the one who doesn't like tribalism. This is the one who insults everybody about tribalism, which is where we're going actually. We're going to that tribalism nonsense that they say. That Mbadiwe was spreading, along with the other letter that I read earlier. In 1949, Zik said, it would appear that the God of Africa has specially created the Ibo nation to lead the children of Africa from the bondage of the ages. The martial prowess of the Ibo nation at all stages of human history has enabled them not only to conquer others, but also to adapt themselves to the role of preserver. The Ibo nation cannot shirk its responsibility. Politically, you have seen with your own eyes how you were disenfranchised by the British. The Ibo nation has never been represented in the Executive Council. Economically, the Ibo nation has labored under onerous taxation measures without sufficient social amenities to justify same. That's the same thing he's saying. Oh, we paid a lot of taxes. We didn't get anything in return. Federal government said you have paid the least in Nigeria. We have been taxed without representation, and our contributions in taxes have been used to develop other areas. I want to read that thing slowly. This is 1949. Please tell me if you've not heard anything like this in 2025. I'll take it again. We have been taxed without representation. Our contributions in taxes have been used to develop other areas out of proportion to the incidence of taxation in those areas. The person who is talking is the one who provides or who generates the least in terms of revenue. Is the exact same thing you see here today. See anything about the last election? Oh, but we pay taxation, we pay taxes, we're the only ones paying taxes in Lagos. Yes, after selling Gala and Lakasera, like we pay taxes. And I'm not saying that no Igbo person pays. Of course, Igbo people pay taxes. But the idea that you pay taxes over everybody, you are the one that they're taking your money and using for everybody. In Nigeria today, first quarter of this year, 2025, the total revenue generated in terms of VAT from the entire southeastern region was a little over 3 billion or so. Oyo State, one state, generated over 79. 32 billion. Oyo State generated 79. That's about 2.5 times what an entire region generated. But it's that region that will tell you that, well, we are paying taxes. We are paying. What are you paying? Oh, they're using our money to generate to develop Nigeria. I will say this respectfully, and again, I hope I'm being respectful enough. Of course, I don't know any other way to say it. When folks from the East say that, are you not using oil money to build all over Nigeria? Number one, every one of us gets something from the oil money, all of us. Number two, when they talk about oil, you should not be saying anything. Walai. You should not be saying anything. With due respect, because there are 3 oil producing states out of the 5 producing states in the southeast. There's Abia, there's Imo, there's Anambra. those three, when you put them together, what they contribute to the oil output in Nigeria is 2.15%. 2.15 freaking percent. That's what they contribute, which is a lot. I mean, until you discover that Lagos, that is not even, it's just a new entrant into this old oil business, produces 2.3. And listen, I'm not talking about Akwa Ibom or Rivers. And the Rivers area that has oil is definitely not where you're from. Because how be the Shekiri and the Urobos, they will have things to say. Anambra is not even a producer. Anambra is actually, you don't even know. You have, they produce about, one is 1.6, maybe 1.3. One measly, Abia is like 1.6, Ibo is like 0.6. Anambra is very tiny thing. The point I'm trying to say is that, listen, don't tell people that they're using your oil money. We need resource control in Nigeria. That oil money that they get from Abia should be used for Abia State. Nobody should take anything from it. NK Ruka, what's your problem with Ibo? Me. Problem with you? No, I don't have any problem with you. It's Ghana, you should go and ask that question. Imo has the highest deposit of gas anyway. Exactly. Potential energy. They have potentials, but it's not kinetic. My prayer for Ibo State, by the way, you have not checked the current statement on oil producing. You think oil gets... I've not checked the current statement on oil producing. Wow. Who did this to you? Want to get here? It is well. When peace like a river. Oh, you can call him and sing. Your entire region generates 2.15% in output. See, we don't even shout about oil. Lagos has about 2.3. Ondo has about 4.5 or 4.8 thereabout. It's not even, I mean, the big boys, you're talking Akwa Ibom, you're talking Rivers, you're talking Delta. Those are the big boys. Right? But even then, I pray, and this is my sincere desire, even for the East, for Imo, whenever they start exploiting the gas, there should be resource control so that they can have all the money from that. Why? It's their land. I don't like, personally, I don't think Nigeria would do very well with these derivatives and derivation formula where you can only get 13%, but you're going to share the money with everybody. Because Nigeria, there's no state in Nigeria without at least one mineral resource. Some people have 5, some have 10, some have 15 mineral resources in one state. There's talc, there's gold, there's lithium, there's bitumen, there's crude, there's things everywhere. So I really pray, gas everywhere. So I pray, and this is my desire for Eastern Nigeria. When it's time to start exploiting the gas in the Imo State, let there be resource control so that they will be able to build the Dubai and the Taiwan, to be able to do, because you have to do something at home before you are insulting everybody for being underdeveloped. Because when we look at home, nah. But everybody, somebody say even the north. There's gold in Zamfara. There's talk all over the place. There's kaolin. It's all over the place. Every state in Nigeria. Some have 10. Nigeria has no business being poor. Our problem is our structure, where everything is so centralized. Thanks to Yoronsi. Everything is so centralized, and people are struggling to allow that. Just allow us breathe. Let the people breathe, like the president says. But I think that with this reorganization going on, Nigeria is going to be, better for it. Let's go back to Zik. Zik said, we have been taxed without representation, and our contribution in taxes have been used to develop other areas. You still hear it today. It's not because it's true. What have we said so far? Azikiwe and his people were against Egbe Ọmọ Odùduwà. They called it a fascist organization. They said people should attack the leaders and members of Egbe Ọmọ Odùduwà, that it was tribalistic. Meanwhile, Azikiwe, who was publishing this thing and calling Egbe Ọmọ Odùduwà tribalistic, was the leader of the Ibo Federal Union, and he was living, guess where? In Aba? No. In Onitsha? Mba. In Owerri? No. He was living in Lagos. He was calling Yoruba people organizing their own ethnic association in Lagos. He called them tribalists. The reaction of Dr. Azikiwe and all his supporters to the newly formed Egbe was violent beyond compare. All the leaders of the Egbe were vilified in Dr. Azikiwe's newspapers. The high watermark of the campaign was reached in the following extract from an editorial article in the Pilot of September 8, 1948. But now that the Egbe has made it clear that its battle is not really against Dr. Azikiwe personally, and even against Igbos as a group, but against the aspirations of the 27 million Nigerians backing up the NCNC, the time has come for real action. Henceforth, the cry must be one of battle against the Egbe Ọmọ Odùduwà, its leaders at home and abroad, uphill and down dale, in the streets of Nigeria and in the residence of its advocates. The Egbe Ọmọ Odùduwà is the enemy of Nigeria. It must be crushed to the earth. There is no going back until the fascist organization of Sir Adeyemo Alakija has been dismembered. Apart from newspaper attacks, there were also physical assaults on the persons of the leaders of the Egbe, and damage to the houses and other property of some of them. It was absolutely impossible on nationalist grounds to reconcile Dr. Azikiwe's insensate hostility to the Egbe with his presidentship of the Ibo Federal Union and his obvious condonation of the existence of a similar organization founded in the northern region in May 1948 and called Jamiya Mutanen Arewa, Northern People's Congress. Besides, in spite of his protestations to the contrary, Dr. Azikiwe was himself an unabashed Igbo jingoist. By the way, this book was written 36 years before Azikiwe died, so he was around when this book was published. So nobody said that they insult him behind his back. Dr. Azikiwe was himself an unabashed Igbo jingoist, and he gave the game completely away when he said inter alia in his presidential address to the Ibo Federal Union in 1949 as follows. It would appear that the God of Africa has specially created the Igbo nation. Think of the Aryan race. Think of Hitler. Think of a superior race. That's the idea. It would appear that the God of Africa has specially created the Igbo nation to lead the children of Africa from the bondage of the ages. The martial prowess of the Igbo nation at all stages of human history has enabled them not only to conquer others, but also to adapt themselves to the role of preserver, which is not true, by the way. The Igbo nation cannot shirk its responsibility. Politically, you have seen with your own eyes how you were disenfranchised by the British. The Igbo nation has never been represented in the Executive Council. Economically, the Igbo nation has labored under onerous taxation measures without sufficient social amenities to justify same. We have been taxed without representation, and our contributions in taxes have been used to develop other areas out of proportion to the incidence of taxation in those areas. It would seem that the Igbo nation is becoming a victim of economic annihilation through a gradual but studied process. In 1945, another Igbo leader and a member of the Nigerian Legislative Council had declared the domination of Nigeria by the Igbos is a question of time. It was clear from these statements and from the general political and journalistic maneuvers of Dr. Azikiwe over the years that is a situation in which one ethnic group would dominate the others does not accord with my conception of a united and happy Nigeria. I am implacably opposed to dictatorship as well as the doctrine of Ehrenvolk, whether it was Hitler's or Dr. Azikiwe's. Why is all this important? We start with Mbadiwe. I read something from a document that was signed by himself and Mbanogu in 1964. This is going to lead us eventually to the cross-carpet issue of 1952. So, 51. So we're going to get to that very soon. Let's start with Mbadiwe. I read the book by Ganiu Daudu, who I mentioned earlier. The book is called Awo or Zik, Who Won the 1951 Western Nigeria Elections. This book was first published in 1997. So this is the NCNC allegations against the action group on the 1951 Western Regional election. But let me explain something. See that Egbe Ọmọ Odùduwà that was formed in 45 in London and 48 in Lagos. That Egbe Ọmọ Odùduwà became the action group in 1951. And that would be the first time that, not the first time, but as far as regional level is concerned, it was the first time that this local, parties were vying for posts. Like we've had elections, but mostly in Lagos. So, for instance, NYM, NNDP, they've been competing in Lagos for Legislative Council for a very long time, at least since the 20s. No, NYM joined the fray in the 30s, but NNDP was there in the 20s. And that was about Macaulay's party before it then, helped form NCNC in the 40s. So let's go to, so I'm just giving that background so you know exactly the connection between Egbe Ọmọ Odùduwà and Action Group. When we get to the Willings Commission report, there's a lot more explanation on these things. So this is the book again by Ganiu Daudu, Awo or Zik, who won the 1951 Western Nigerian elections. This man was one of the major leaders of Action Group back in the 50s. Before I go to the meat of this work, which is to prove conclusively that the Action Group won decisively the Western Regional elections of 1951, it is necessary to recap the allegations of the NCNC leaders and their supporters in respect of the elections. Dr. Kingsley Ozumba Mbadiwe, who was noted throughout his political career for making flamboyant statements and allegations without bothering to substantiate them, was the most vicious accuser of the Action Group leadership of everything evil in respect of 1951 parliamentary elections. His name would readily come to mind because of his many attacks, some of which I wish to refer to. Let me tell you something about him before I read what he said. Do you guys remember the book by Frederick Forsyth, The Biafran Story? Well, in that book, Forsyth was giving us lumber by telling us something that happened on the 15th of January during the first coup in Nigeria. Well, the first coup that was executed in Nigeria's history. And one of those lambas, if you don't know what lamba is, check online. Lamba is Fabu. Fabu is Fable. One of the lambas had something to do with Mbadiwe. According to Frederick Forsyth, who was a Biafran propagandist, when the soldiers were when they were on a killing spree, just killing everybody, Mbadiwe somehow ran across an open field with the soldiers on the other side, ran across an open field and entered straight into the residence of the president, who, by the way, wasn't around in Nigeria at the time, because again, he knew about it. One of these days, I promise, I'm going to have a session on how I am so sure and what documents we have to prove that Zik actually, not just that we're not just making it up, that he actually knew about it, the things he said and the things that were said about him in Nigeria and in Britain at the time. We'll talk about this some other time. Anyway, Mbadiwe ran across an open field and ran straight into the residence of the president of Nigeria, who was not in the country at the time, and it was the only place the soldiers did not search. Like I said, folks from the east, by the east I mean the southeastern part of Nigeria today, and their friends who write Nigerians' history, they must think that their readers are dumb. And that's why I don't like their books. I will still read the books. I still read their books. I don't mind. I have a number of them. But I think they disrespect their readers. There's an assumption that all of us who are reading, because when I say read, I'm not talking about their people. I'm saying all of us who buy the books, they assume we don't have sense. Because when you read their books, you'll be like, how? Anyway, that Mbadiwe who somehow escaped and he went to the place that the only place the soldiers did not think of searching. That Mbadiwe is the one who wrote this fantastic book called Rebirth of a Nation that Daudu is quoting here. In his autobiography titled Rebirth of a Nation, Dr. Mbadiwe wrote in the last paragraph of page 71 of the book as follows: "But in pursuance of the policy of creating a political climate healthy enough to make one a citizen wherever he lives." I'll read it slowly. Please, as I'm reading, just imagine you are listening to a young person on Twitter. This is the same mindset. in pursuance of the policy of creating a political climate healthy enough to make one a citizen wherever he lives, Dr. Azikiwe contested and won the general elections in 1951 into the Western House of Assembly. Let me pause to say something. Yoruba people, we've been called tribalists and all sorts of terrible names because of Saturday elections. Own it. Wear it like a badge of honor. Wear it like a badge of honor. I'll tell you why. Nigeria did not start in 2025. The first time we had regional elections in Nigeria's history was 1951. And in that year, not 2025, 1951, in that year, not just one, there are a number of Igbos who won seats in Yorùbáland. 1951. This is not an appointment, this is election. I'm not saying folks were appointed. I'm saying people that were elected. Zik was in Ibadan representing a part of Lagos. Ebubedike was also in parliament. The idea that, oh, you are bad people, you don't want us to have your space in your politics, you don't want us to do anything, tell them you don't care. Listen, I really don't care. Why? We've done it. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times. No, it's happened over and even this republic, this 4th republic, we did it. There was a House of Assembly member who was Ibo. A number of them actually in Lagos State House of Assembly. It didn't take long before I started hearing some funny things. Why are they speaking Yoruba on Thursday? Okay, what happened on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday? 1. Number 2, why are you in a Yoruba state that you can't speak the language, you don't understand the language? Number 3, why would you even have a problem with a Yoruba person speaking, even if I decide to use it Yoruba Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as language of business? What's that to you? So, to the glory of God, this last election, Saturday elections, all the chairmen and councillors, all of them are Yoruba. Let me clap for Jesus. Thank you very much. And that's how it will always be. I said that to say this. The idea of, oh, we are not opening your place up, we are not opening up, we have opened it up. The very first election, 1951, we allowed Igbos in parliament because it's one Nigeria. It's one Nigeria, right? Until it's no longer one Nigeria. Just continue. Let's continue. So Dr. Azikiwe contested and won the general elections. You know what? Maybe after this, I'm going to go into what happened with TOS Benson. We'll get to it after this series. We'll get into it. Because all this open your door for everybody is nonsense. It's not going to work again. TOS Benson was a man from Ikorodu. I'm not saying anybody is a bad person. I'm just telling you what happened in history. Make of it whatever you want. God bless all of us. TOS Benson was from Ikorodu. People living in Ikorodu who were Igbos sent a message to Enugu talking to Okpara that they did not want TOS Benson, an Ikorodu person, to represent his own place. And they preferred an Igbo person. Guess what? They got it though. They did it in Ikorodu. They did it in Ikeja. This was in the 1960s. I Egbe Takpa, meaning Pari, because I respect Takpa people. But you get the point. TOS had to run as an independent candidate in order to win. What happened in Lagos last election is what will happen in Yorùbáland every election forever. You come to my space, I allow you, because I think we are all one Nigeria, then you displace me and ensure that the person you are replacing me with is somebody from your place. And every time you get somebody who is Yoruba, he has to be like they said in 1948 in Daily Service, the Yoruba people wrote it, they said, the waves and strays of Yoruba race. Those who will support you and say stuff. And that's what was happening in Ethiopia is happening right now. You got angry with Yoruba leaders. You got angry with APC. Say you don't like what they are doing. You voted anybody. Now you voted somebody who doesn't really care about the space. I mean, maybe he cares, but sometimes the way we care may be different. Some people feel care, say, okay, maybe just make sure we maintain the status quo. Me anything no spoil. Some people say they care enough to make it better. Now the person is in House of Rep, you are now angry, you are now shouting, why is he not doing something? Maybe you said that your own person who was even doing something, or, you didn't like what they were doing. So LP top to bottom. It is well. Let's get back to this. In pursuance of the policy of creating a political climate healthy enough to make one a citizen wherever he lives, Dr. Azikiwe contested and won the general elections in 1951 into the Western House of Assembly. To stultify this policy of one Nigeria in favor of his tribally based philosophy, Chief Awolowo got some elected members to cross the carpet from the NCNC to his AG side. Zik, the victor, lost, and Awolowo's party was able to form the government of the Western region. Everything I just read right now, na lie. Let me quickly say it. Now let's continue. I'll explain later. I also like to refer to another statement by Dr. Mbadiwe, this time on page 75 of the same book, where he asserted as follows: in the Western region, the NCNC won the elections over I'll take it again. In the Western region, the NCNC won the elections over the Action Group by a handsome majority. Here began the great innovation and surprise in Nigeria elections hinted earlier. A most dangerous practice in the electoral process of Nigeria was introduced for the first time, namely carpet crossing. Again, lies. But stay with me. I'm saying it because somebody might cut this thing out and say Busui said it. Mbadiwe lied. But I'm not surprised. Everybody, is about propaganda at the end of the day. But let's continue. A most dangerous practice in the electoral process of Nigeria was introduced for the first time, namely carpet crossing and open bribery, which were brought into operation by the Action Group. Overnight, successful NCNC members were bought over by the Action Group, and the majority was reversed in its favor. Embers of tribalism were fanned by the Action Group leadership. Successful NCNC men who were not Yoruba were scared away. Dr. Azikiwe, who won a seat to the Western House of Assembly from a Lagos constituency, decided to resign. Since membership of the House of Representatives was by an electoral college in the regional house, no NCNC from the West came to the House of Representatives in Lagos. That was how Awolowo and his team qualified for the federal house, and Zik was therefore excluded. Now that we are done with all that nonsense, let's read what really happened. Well, I'll read it from here, then I'll read it from another book in a bit. Again, I'm sorry, everything I just read right now from, by the way, total hogwash, nonsense. This is why I feel sorry for young Igbo people, because how do elders do this thing to the generations of their people? Just be lying. T.O.S. Benson was a Zikist who married an Igbo woman. It was something similar to President the Obedient. But I will just say he was a Zikist. Yes. He married an Igbo woman. Yes. They showed him pepper. Yes. He learned his lesson. Maybe. But let's continue. But yeah, you're right in most of the things you said. Yes. I don't know if I can call him an obedient, but wait, if it was Zikist, he was obedient. No. Yes, you are right, Jerry. Sometimes when I talk about those older people, I'm always trying to be, but to be honest, it was a Zikist. So, Zikists are obedient. Those are the grandfathers. Let's continue. In addition to the two statements quoted above, the late Dr. Mbadiwe, a former federal minister and prominent leader of the NCNC, addressed the press on his vision of the Third Republic on Wednesday, 20th September 1989. During the course of this press conference, he launched another attack on the late Chief Obafemi Awolowo. This was 2 years after Papa died. So he launched an attack on the late Chief Obafemi Awolowo and his party and accused them of introducing carpet crossing into Nigerian politics. He also repeated his false claim that it was the NCNC and not the Action Group that won the first parliamentary elections into the Western House of Assembly in 1951. I wish to quote what he said on that occasion, as reported in The Guardian of Thursday, 21st September 1989. Said he, quote, Dr. Azikiwe and his party won the majority of the seats in the Western House of Assembly. He was due to be elected the leader of government business when overnight the action group introduced the notorious carpet crossing. By this manipulation, members who won under the NCNC, is a lie, crossed over to the action group, building it to become the majority party in the West. As a result of this, Chief Awolowo was elected leader of government business and Dr. Azikiwe had to resign. Each of the three statements of the late elder statesman, why would you call him a statesman? He's a liar. Well, maybe some statesmen lie, but I don't know any, but maybe because I'm Yoruba, but it's well. Anyway, let's continue. Each of the three statements of the late elder statesman quoted above, with due regard to his political status and memory, is, to say the least, the very opposite of the truth. I like Yoruba elders, shall say is the opposite of the truth. It's a lie. It is a lie. I'll read that thing again. Each of the three statements of the late elder statesman quoted above, with due regard to his political status and memory, is, to say the least, the very opposite of the truth. It is a classic example of what is known in legal parlance as expressio falsi suppressio veri. When the last statement quoted above was published on the 21st September 1989, the author wrote a rejoinder which was published in the Nigerian Tribune of Tuesday, October 17, 1989, with the title History, Politics and the Nigerian Nation. The Guardian and Vanguard of Friday, October 20, 1989, with the headlines Mbadiwe and the 1951 elections, and K.O. Mbadiwe and the 1951 Western Region elections, between fact and fiction respectively. The Daily Sketch also ran the story with the caption rejoinder Mbadiwe's Great Falsification. Mbadiwe's Great Falsification on Friday, 27th October 1989. The rejoinder, published in 4 dailies on 3 different dates given above, contained in an abridged form the facts put across in this work. In the rejoinder, I explained why I had to write as follows. In the interest of truth and accurate record of events, and in order to educate many who might have been misled either in the past because of such past untrue statements by other NCNC leaders or by the one under reference, I like to give the facts which I am sure will convince an unbiased person of the inaccuracies of Dr. Mbadiwe's assertions, which are a falsification of events. Now, let me read something to you from this book. So I'm reading the book Awo, Unfinished Greatness by Olufemi Ogunsanwo. It says Awolowo's timing of the formation of his political party was quite propitious because it came at a time when there was a vacuum in indigenous political leadership in the Western region. The only national party in existence at this time was the NCNC. Herbert Macaulay, a Lagosian and the first president of this party, had died in 1946. And even before his demise, the mantle of leadership had fallen on Zik, who as Secretary General had been an understudy since 1937 and had launched several newspapers to give it solid propaganda. Macaulay enshrined this succession in his will. Up until 1967, when 12 new states were carved out of the existing 4 regions, Lagos, demarcated at Ikorodu Road, remained a part of the Western region. Some section of it was excised in 1959 as the Federal Capital Territory. All along, Zik had made Lagos his political base, and since the capital of the Western region was Ibadan, he also operated more or less from there. Before Awolowo came on the scene, it was quite interesting that Zik and Ibo, born in Zungeru, northern Nigeria, on November 24, 1904, held sway on the political scene of the Western region and Lagos as primus inter pares in the leadership stakes. He was a popular national figure as a foremost fighter against British colonial rule up to that point, and in the elections into the municipal councils of Lagos in 1950, Zik's NCNC swept the polls. Every time he mounted the soapbox in Lagos, it was greeted with deafening cheers of Zik. Yet, Lagos was predominantly a Yoruba city. In fact, there was little competition for power before the arrival of the AG on the political scene, as the northern leaders were quite happy with the British calling the shots in their region and the country at large with the indirect rule system, giving the emirs some administrative leverage. Even the northern political leaders drew inspiration from the fire of Zik's nationalism and oratory. Zik spoke Ibo and Yoruba fluently. By the way, to his own credit, Zik was a fantastic speaker. Right. The first time Awolowo met Zik was when he was covering an event where Zik was speaking. This was in 1934. Zik had been invited to speak in a couple of schools, secondary schools in Lagos. And he used, of course, big words according to Papa and NS Ekoli and the rest of, because NS Ekoli was, Awolowo was working with or for NS Ekoli, who was the editor of the newspaper. So Awolowo was a freelance journalist at the time. So that was the first time he ever, encountered Zik. He was a fantastic speaker, wonderful orator, but he was an ethnic jingoist. Let's go back to the book now. This is why, if you're a Yoruba person, a lot of Yoruba people don't speak because they are Zikist or they like the idea of Zik because they call it Pan-Africa. You don't know what you're talking about. This man has. One day we're going to even talk about that Pan-African thing and what happened between him and Kwame Nkrumah. Everything is branding and propaganda. The truth is little. But let's continue the reading. So he says here that there was little competition for power before the arrival of the AG on the political scene, as the northern leaders were quite happy with the British calling the shots in their region and the country at large with the indirect rule system, giving the emirs some administrative leverage. Even the northern political leaders drew inspiration from the fire of Zik's nationalism and oratory. Zik spoke Ibo and Yoruba fluently. The only political outfits which participated in electoral contests prior to the emergence of the Action Group in 1951 in Lagos, where the agitation for self-rule was the loudest, were the amalgam of the NCNC, NNDP, and the nascent Labour movement, as well as the Lagos Market Women Organization, which is where you find the woman, the predecessor, who knows her name? She was the predecessor to Abibatu Mogaji, Tinubu's mother. The leader of the market women who worked with Abat Macaulay. Who knows her name? Belewura. That's her name. Belewura. Let's continue. Zik was the leader of the first outfit. Awo told the story of how, as a reporter for the Daily Times, he was sent to cover a public lecture delivered by Zik in Lagos in the early 40s. Actually, it was in the 30s. So he probably mixed it up. The other groups were an amorphous collection of individual office seekers who saw politics as a means of earning a living. In this kind of political setting, Zik desired to rule a predominantly Yoruba Western region as its first elected premier. But regardless of his nationalism, it defies imagination that Macaulay would have contemplated a scenario where a non-indigene would seek the highest political office in the land. Picture Macaulay, a Yoruba, as leader of the NCNC, if he was still alive, arriving in Enugu in 1952 to take office as first premier of the Eastern region simply because his party won elections in the Ibo country. Zik was a nationalist who preferred to rule in Ibadan rather than Enugu, said Alhaji Lateef Jakonde, Awo's protege, when this author interviewed him in March 2003. The Action Group arrived with a bang on 28th April. Let me even say something before I continue with this. Zik should never have been allowed to rule, to even win any elective post in Lagos. Why? Read that speech of 1949. I read it earlier. Nobody could make that kind of speech in Yorùbáland and expect to win anything in terms of politics. That is what I believe. The Igbos are a master race. They are better than everybody else. You have been called to rule all of us. Why? And then after hearing all of those things, I should still vote for you in Yorùbáland. Even that was a mistake. But we were able to deal with that eventually. So let's continue. The Action Group arrived with a bang on 28th April 1951 in Owo to challenge the supremacy of the NCNC and energize the clamor for self-rule for the regions. It was well received by the indigenous people of the Western region and the intelligentsia as a counterweight to the Lagos-based NCNC. Dr. Azikiwe and his party did not take the new party too seriously at first. Similar competitive attempts had been made by others in the past and had been squashed at birth with the powerful propaganda machine at the disposal of the NCNC. What's that machine called? West African Pilot. Besides, Lagos was the center of gravity for the country's politics, and so it's reckoned that the new regional political outfit based in Ibadan was destined to live a short life. The party also had an informal pact with the Ibadan People's Party, led by Adegoke Adelabu, who, by the way, is the grandfather of the present Minister of Power. What's his name? Adebayo Adelabu. So he says, the party also had an informal pact with the Ibadan People's Party, led by Adegoke Adelabu, which is relied on to counter any indigenous challenger. That was the wishful thinking of the NCNC. Meanwhile, the struggle for freedom from colonial rule was gathering momentum, and the AG was working silently to meet the challenges. Alhaji Ganiu Daudu, one of the young AG contestants for a municipal seat in Lagos in 1957, that's the one who wrote the book we read earlier, he has shed some light on the reasons why the NCNC was caught napping at the dawn of the emergence of the Action Group in 1951 in his incisive study entitled Who Won the 1951 Western Region Election, Awo or Zik? This study was published to mark Afenifere Action Group's golden anniversary in 2001. Daudu wrote, by the year 1951, the NCNC had tremendous goodwill but lacked organization. Penkelemes, yes. You're right. That's Adelabu Penkelemes. I'm sure you know what it means, because if you know that means you know it. But thank you for writing that. Thanks a lot. By the year 1951, the NCNC had tremendous goodwill but lacked organization. One of the reasons for this was the proscription on 13 April 1950 of the Zikist movement. The Action Group benefited from the troubles and prevarications of the NCNC and its militant wing at this material time of its foundation. Elections had been called in its region of founding at the same time that the NCNC was facing its crisis in the hands of the colonial masters. Clearly, what Awolowo's outfit lacked in political experience and membership, it made up for in the disarray of his chief rival. The NCNC, under Zik's leadership, was to miscalculate further. After the Richards Constitution had been sanctioned in 1946, their attitude and reaction was to denounce it as too little, too late. In fact, the NCNC called for a boycott of this constitution and the legislatures it sought to bring into existence at the federal and regional levels. The NCNC platform in the years following the proclamation of the constitution was something called, quote-unquote, positive action in their battle against the colonialists. I'm going somewhere, please stay with me. Zik's group of supporters called for a mass boycott of all boycottables, which included refusal to pay taxes, flying of black flags, revolutionary slogans, and sing songs, and so on. Zik himself, in grandiloquent grandstanding, announced his voluntary withdrawal from public life for a period of 5 years, beginning from the introduction of that constitution in 1946. He promised to lie low till 1951, when the Macpherson Constitution came into force. His paper spit fire in its editorials, but Zik pointedly, I'm going to read this slowly. His paper, that's West African Pilot, spit fire in its editorials, but Zik pointedly avoided signing any write-up for which he could be charged with sedition. After his narrow escape from sedition charges in the Gold Coast, being imprisoned by the colonial masters for sedition was not part of his idea of national sacrifice. All this lethargy created a political vacuum which came in handy for Awolowo and his new political outfit to exploit. What is he saying so far? Here's what he's saying. Number one, by 1951, NCNC had grown, right? Especially in Lagos. And you see, if you understand the politics of Nigeria in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, you will see that everything was directed towards nationalism. Even Awo, who eventually formed Action Group, they were all part of a movement called Nigerian Youth Movement. It was a nationalist organization. They wanted independence, they wanted indigenization of the civil service, just like other political parties like NNDP did, you know. And they also, you know, vied for political offices in the legislative council in Lagos. But you see, everything changed in 1940 into 1941. We'll go deep into it some other time. But what happened really was that Zik introduced tribalism into politics by using Ijebu man against the rest of the people and saying that the reason they don't like him was because he was from Ijebu. Even though the people were against him, the major person was also an Ijebu person. We'll talk about that. So the point is that everybody was always nationalistic in their thoughts, like, oh, we're all together, until what happened in 37, between 37 and 1940. Zik was vicious, but he never shone fully. By 1940 to 1941, he succeeded in breaking apart the NYM using the Ijebu man, Obakisonya. Then later on, in 1945, the speech from the Ibo started circulating. Everybody was hearing what Onyema was saying. In 1949, they then heard and read what Zik was saying. It was 12 years. So Zik had published for 12 years. It was 12 years. So Zik had published for 12 years. And they understood exactly what it was. In fact, before 49, 48. What happened with Egbe Ọmọ Odùduwà made people really understand that, listen, Otoge. So he started writing that thing in 1937. 1948, it came to a head. It was in 48 that we had something called the Lagos Press War, where Yoruba people actually went to town. And they went to town because that was the very first time that they were able to put together their own publishing publishing organization or newspaper that would actually speak what they had to say. When you hear things about Lagos Ibadan media, Lagos Ibadan propaganda, that thing they're talking about is nonsense. What they are doing is this. Propaganda started in Nigeria by Zik. Anybody who responds to what he's saying, he calls a propagandist. And that started in 1948. But we'll have that history some other time. We'll talk about the Lagos Press War when the time comes. Where I'm going really is this. The whole idea of politics in Nigeria was nationalistic up until Zik was introduced into it. Now, Macaulay, I think in his, again, Yoruba, we're all together mindset, felt Zik was, it was a Nigerian, we were all working for Nigeria, and then put Zik. But one of the things they did back then was that they would bully people into doing what they want. And the arm of the party of NCNC that did that was the Zikist movement. They will bully people with words, but they also bully people with machetes. They will, when Awolowo was writing in 1948 of buildings being destroyed, it was by the Zikist movement. Because the matter was changed, and Zik did this intentionally. You read the paper in 1948, September. Read the paper. He said, now that the Egbe has shown that his fight is not with Dr. Azikiwe or the Ibo State Union or the NCNC, but with Nigeria and the 27 million people supporting NCNC, what is it doing? It's riling his supporters up. And then he said, the battle must be taken to them. Updale and downvale, everywhere they go, we must attack them, their leaders. And so they began to attack them. That's what Zikism was about. Well, that was how they carried out their activities. That's how they got the, whatever you call their ideology, to work for them. Interestingly, by 51, the colonial government had had enough of Zikism. So they proscribed the organization. They were too violent. They were this, they were that. Which I think is maybe, if it's similar to what happened to IPOB. What happened to IPOB? That proscription, that's exactly what happened to. And why am I bringing IPOB? Because the person leading the obedient movement said that IPOB is a charity organization. He said there is neighbors, there is people. That's what he said. If you've not seen the interview, please check YouTube. You'll find it. Just look for Peter Obi and IPOB interview. You'll find it there. He said there is neighbors. So that means that he has no problems with them. Anyway, the fact that was happening then gave AG the leeway, like they were able to take advantage of the disadvantage that NCNC was experiencing due to the proscription of the Zikist movement. Okoku was a nationalist. My point is, Zik began tribalism stylishly. Yes, it did. You know what? Let me write it down. I refer to this thing a lot, but we should have a session on it. Zik and tribalism. And why do I do this thing? Why do I do this thing? I've said it several times. Why are you always talking about these guys? Because propaganda has gone on for about 60 years in Nigeria. And it has gone on at the expense of Yoruba people.